Most of the time when people talk about how to solo over chord changes in jazz, then they focus on what to play on each of the chords. But that's maybe not what's most difficult about this. Maybe it's also not what's most important, because of course you need to have something to play on each of the chords. But the difficult part is not to play something, and a chord is not just sort of this static moment, it's part of a progression, and you need to play something that makes sense on that chord, but it also needs to fit with the next chord, and it has to sound like a natural melody moving from one chord to the next. The approach that I'm going to cover is actually what I'm using, and also what I really felt like made the way that I play changes and really made it a lot easier to play some stronger solos. And it's also something that I teach, and I've seen it make a huge impact on the playing of my students again and again. So this is definitely worth checking out if you feel like you can play something on each chord, but you can actually play sort of a longer story over several different chords. My name is Jens Larsen. Learn jazz, make music. Let's keep this really simple. So I'm going to focus on just the first two chords in a 2-5-1 in C major. So that means I'm working with D minor, G7 to C major 7. I'm gonna focus on the D minor 7, G7 part really. It doesn't really matter what progression you're using. This works pretty much on all progressions. But it's much more about just having a progression that you maybe already can hear, and also so that you have something that you can immediately try to apply to the music and the songs that you're playing. This progression is in the key of C major, and the scale that goes with it will then be this C major scale. And as you probably already know, since we're playing over the chord changes, it also makes a lot of sense to know the arpeggios of these chords. But I'm actually kind of assuming that you already have that. Otherwise, I have a lot of other videos that are talking about how to learn arpeggios. And that will be these arpeggios. If you're playing from D minor 7 to G7, then you can also see that already in the voicings that I'm using here. The really important thing that happens here is that this note, the C, moves down to a B. So I'm going to use the B as a target note, because if I'm playing this note, then the B, if I play it up here, it's not in this chord, but it's in the next one. And that means that if I'm playing that in my solo, then it's also kind of clear that now I'm changing chord, especially if you play towards it and then play that on the one. One of the most important things when it comes to music, and certainly in jazz, is that you're thinking ahead. So you want to think about the fact that you want to hit the B on the 1 of the G7 bar, but you want to think about that while you're improvising on the D minor 7, so that you're coming up with a line that's really moving towards that B. And in that way, have a logical movement from the D minor 7 into the G7, and you're really hitting that B on the 1, so it's very clear that now the chord is changing. As you can hear in this really simple example, then my D minor melody, which is in fact just the D minor 7 arpeggio, is really just put there to give me a way to get to that B. So the whole point of my D minor melody is that I want to make a melody that flows in a natural way towards that B. That's giving the melody sort of a natural shape or a natural direction, and that makes the melody and the solo as a whole sound a lot more logical to the listener. And you want to work on trying to come up with lines that have that characteristic. So you want to think about what is the target note in the next chord, and how do I play a melody from this chord that's going to end there in a natural way, in a logical way, because that's going to connect everything. And if you do that for each of the chords, then you will have a natural flow across the chords, and it sounds like you know what you're doing. It doesn't sound like you're just trying to hit some notes on this chord and then some other notes on this chord, which is really going to split up things. You want to play the movement of the chords, you want to play this flow through the progression. And some more advanced examples of this could sound like this. Of course, it takes a bit of practice to get to play lines like this, and I would suggest that the way you do this is that you first figure out what target note you want to use, and that's really just about finding a note that's not in the previous chord. That's also what I'm doing here. If you look at a D minor 7, then that's D, F, A, and C, and in G7 you have G, B, D, and F, and then the B is sort of a very characteristic note that I can hit on that one. That's why I'm choosing that one. It's easier to hear, and you can use other ones as well, but if you start with that one, so the third of the chord, then you really have one that's sort of very colorful and very strong and easy to work with. And then I would suggest you just sit down and try to play rubato solo lines. Keep in mind that you're still playing 8 notes, but just try to come up with melodies that are on D minor 7 using sort of a D minor 7 arpeggio or D minor 7 sound, but then moving towards that B. And that way, if you're still playing stuff that you know are 8th notes, then you're building a vocabulary that you can start working with once you start playing in time. So first you try rubato just to experiment and try to get used to this way of thinking, where you're thinking ahead, where you're thinking about, I'm playing D minor 7, but I want to go to B on the G7, and in that way connect those 2 chords. This process is then something you can take further and move into also playing towards the C major 7, or take it to some songs. Try it out rubato first, take it into a medium or at least an easy tempo, and in that way try to generalize it. You'll also find that once you start really thinking like this, it gets a lot easier once you take other target notes, or if you need to play on other chord progressions. When it comes to choosing the target notes, I think you just want to look at what notes are in the chord that you're playing on now and what notes are in the next chord, and then try to choose something. And of course, in this case, I'm taking sort of the one really defining note, which is the C going from the B on a D minor 7 G7, but you can also use other ones. The 3rd, as I said already, is a really strong note. The 5th works quite well also, so that's also one to try out. And for the rest, if we're playing with an altered dominant here, then you get a completely different scale sound, so that can sometimes make it a little bit easier. So if you're playing on a G7 and you have the flat 9 or the flat 13, they will make really easy target notes to hear, and it's important to have something that's easy to hear. If you can't hear in the melody that now we're kind of changing because there's another note coming along, then it can be difficult to really get used to thinking like this and hearing what's going on. So let's just have a look at another example. Let's take the beginning part of Take the A Train. That's then C major 7 moving to D7 sharp 11. If we take the 3rd of the chord, so on the D7, that's an F sharp, then you can have a line like this. But here we also have another very sort of colorful, significant note in the melody, which is the sharp 11. And we can target that one as well. That would be something like this. So when I'm choosing the target notes, then I'm either just going for really basic chord tones, like the 3rd and the 5th, or I'm looking at the chord in the context and I'm trying to understand what the chord is doing there, and then using that information to choose a nice target note. For instance, here I'm using the sharp 11 on the D7 because it's in the melody, it's really sort of a part of the sound of this song also. And in the end, we want to choose notes related to how we're actually playing a complete piece of music. So having that kind of information in there is something that's actually really useful. If you want to check out some more approaches to improvising over chord changes and finding some ways to make some strong melodies going through a chord progression, then check out this video where I'm going over 3 different approaches to improvising over chord progressions, connecting the lines across the chords.